welcoming back to the show an old friend who's been on a few times now. I think we're going to have to give him loyalty points and maybe work out some kind of reward for his contributions to the show. But it's always a pleasure to catch up with the Grumbler, better known to us as Richard Clarke. Richard, welcome.
Hi, Darren. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Lots and lots and lots and lots to talk about. But I'd like to try and find interesting angles because I think there's a lot's been done to death in the press. But I guess given that you have on a county cricket cap, that we should talk about the position that county cricket finds itself in. Obviously, the problems are well known to everyone that's listening. They wouldn't be listening to the show if they didn't have an interesting cricket. Have you got any thoughts on where we go from here?
I mean, I've been reading a lot about this, and I'm hoping that we've reached the nadir, and we're now in the situation where we're trying to build back better, as a certain Tory Prime Minister says. Not that, in my opinion, we should follow his lead. However, the concept of there are opportunities in crises. There is an upside to crises in that it is an opportunity. If everyone accepts there is a severe issue that needs to be solved, if there is a will, you can create something better. You know, that's the upside of things going completely wrong, and the obvious need for change. I mean, I've seen it written this morning that cricket needs a kick it out type of body like football's got, and I think that would be extremely interesting. I also have tweeted about the Rooney Rule, which I'm a big fan of in America. Not that it's perfect, but that is the rule where any senior coaching position, you have to, if you're a club, you have to interview, not necessarily appoint, but interview a BAME candidate. And the advantage of that is it BAME or BAME? Which should I say? Which are you going
for? God knows, but I don't know. But I'll settle for BAME.
Right, okay, BAME candidate. The advantage is that more experience is given to these particular candidates, so they're more likely to get roles. And the very fact they're seen means they're more likely to get roles. And I think that is very significant because then players are, you know, we've seen it talked about this week a few times. Players need to toe the line, do things that they don't want to do or they feel that is wrong because it ingratiates them with the coach. They don't want to be seen as a troublemaker, blah, 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 blah. Well, if you solve that from a senior coaching level and, of course, senior execs within clubs, that is helping to solve that particular problem. You know, I think we were talking about before how many cricket coaches, county cricket coaches, are from a BAME background. Mark Ramprakash at Middlesex is a batting consultant now, and I know he's
the winter. Yeah.
Is there anyone else? Can I think?
No, not that I can think of. Not that I can think of.
That's not good enough.
No, and I think you've had instances in the past where people have come forward and been appointed, but it hasn't lasted for whatever reason. I think it's a story about inclusivity, and I want to throw this as broadly as possible, but I think you're right. I think people need to be encouraged to put themselves forward for these positions. The accusation in the past is that you've had, for example, you might look at however many Black or Asian heritage players that have played for England and have gone on to do very, very little within the game afterwards. That's despite, not for the want of trying. I think David Sid Lawrence was a recent example of someone that just was banging against a door that was firmly shut. That door's got to open. And I like your idea of people being considered for the process. And I think the only way you're going to get people, I'm a big believer in meritocracy, that, you know, if you're good enough, you're, you know, regardless of whatever background or, you know, gender. I mean, you could even argue that, you know, as sport as a whole levels out, to use another political phrase, leveling out or leveling up or whatever it is, or leveling down. why we aren't seeing more. I think the next stage generally will be to see more women involvement, to see more women on the bench of a Premier League club, to see more women running clubs, to see more women coaches. That's the next step generally. But cricket, I think the first thing is to be more inclusive, because it is seen, and rightly or wrongly, the perception of cricket is elitist. And I think we need to get back from that public school, expensive sport to play, shut door approach, or the perception.
And that's very much happened in the last generation for me, that we talk a lot about diversity with regard to gender, diversity with regard to race, quite rightly. There's also, I think, the issue that's cropped up, which is related to those other two, is diversity with regard to education. I see cricket having become much more of a public school sport in the last generation. And of course, it's run by people who go to public school. And I think this has been talked about by individuals in the past. The ACE project, which I think is great, which is involved with Ebony Rainford Brent, and even there is another. I forget the name, but it was games that are being played in Lords for state schools, specifically for state schools, to give them a little bit more experience. Because and yet again, if you talk about meritocracy, well, the local public school is often going to have an ex-cricket professional as their specific cricket coach and have really good facilities. And so if we're talking about meritocracy, of course, they're going to have massively more advantages. Where I played in my, Hessian covered grey, horrible Essex comprehensive school that I went to in Epping, it was one kit bag with chewed up pads and rubber matting, and we barely played because it was exam time. And if the PE teacher didn't fancy it, we barely played anyway. So, but there is an issue about whether schools is the answer anyway, because of all those issues that surround cricket as a summer sport, whether clubs are the answer. And that's why, I've got a lot of time for the All-Stars scheme. It's club-based. It's not perfect, but it is at least trying to do good things in a good way. You're much more connected to club cricket than I am, but the execution of schemes such as All-Stars can be a bit patchy depending on the club, whether they're funded, what their attitude is to youth, all that kind of stuff. But we can't rely on schools. We can't rely on schools to do it for the issues of money, timing, specifically with cricket, kit, all those practical things that have always got in the way. And then there were the Tories selling off the playing fields in the 80s. I'm going to
go for it.
I'm going to turn into Root Mail if it kills me. But that was another factor as well. So it's not surprising that in the last generation we have seen it become more elitist in every respect.
It's a good point you make about All-Stars and Dynamos and all the rest of it. Fantastic schemes, and it has caught the imagination of a lot of youngsters. Now, as you say, I'm heavily involved at Bittericky. That has been an enormous success. I've got a number of 85 that's in my head about All-Stars, but whatever it is, it's a lot of kids that have come forward and are tasting cricket for the first time. But you know what the biggest problem that we've got is not selling the product, it's actually running it. Because if you've got 85 kids that turn up on a Friday night, you need at least 8 to 10 volunteers to run the coaching. And that's the biggest struggle that we have. People are quite happy to bring their children down and take part, but trying to get people within the club, whether it's first team players, coaches, or even parents, just to take a quick course, get a badge, and be in a position. That's the biggest struggle. So as you say, there's no perfect fit, and it's an uphill struggle. But I think it has to. I think the future is with the clubs, because, as you say, the schools have no playing fields left.
And also, the general perception, from my understanding as in sports marketing, is you need to get into the kid's head in primary school. Otherwise, they're kind of gone to the sport. Now, football's fine, but if it's rugby or cricket, sports that are big but not football, you need to get that kid either playing the game or watching the game on television or attending a game by the time they leave primary school. And that's one of the reasons, from my understanding, is why the All-Stars scheme is pitched at the age it is. I think it's 8 to 11, isn't it? Those last 3 years of primary school. But, the other thing with primary schools is, and I don't think, I hope that I'm not speaking out of turn, they struggle with sport anyway. To teach sport, it tends to be many more female teachers than male teachers. Not that female teachers can't teach sport, but it's often not a specialism. And I look at my example, the example of my small primary school that my kids went to when we came back to this country. And the PE was done by a sort of outside body, which was a few sports coaches that kind of did it on the side, on the back of their other coaching. It wasn't really that football side, and any cricket that they did was done was outsourced, as it were. Now, what you want is a PE teacher who can who's connected with a local club and can push any talented kid into the club. Turn around to little Johnny or Jenny and say, "You're really good at this. Why not go down to the local club and have a go?" That's kind of what you want. I have no perception about how that is working. As I say, I'll put that to you as someone more involved. But isn't that kind of what you want?
Yeah, you're right. And I think it's grabbing their attention, because thinking back to when we were sort of that age, it's very easy on a playground to stick down a couple of coats and jumpers, make a couple of goals, doesn't matter about the size of whatever else, and kick a ball about. Someone's always got a football. I mean, in my day, we used to nip into Woolworths and spend 50p and get a plastic thing, but that would do for lunchtime at school. It
was the Winfield balls that.
Yeah, that's right. They were too light. They were too light.
Yes.
I told you we were the same.
Then everyone was involved, and in cricket is an individual sport in a team context. That's the other part. That everyone's. I mean, I coach my boys' football team, and that's hard enough even in an inclusive game where you need minimal, let alone cricket where you've got to set stuff up and get everyone involved, and it's hard. I would assume coaching. I mean, that's why the quick cricket was involved, which was kind of tip and run. Yeah. Because it got everyone involved. And I was interested to see. I'm quite a fan of Arfan Akram, his work at Essex.
Yeah.
And I look at what he does, Essex in the community, and the stuff that I see there with the BAME mums and daughters I think it's at Leighton where Essex used to play.
Right. Yeah, the Leighton hub.
Yeah, and that stuff is really cool because everyone's involved, they're shrieking, they're getting involved. The mums shriek, when they hit the ball a long way, they shriek. But it's enthusiasm. It's great. It's absolutely great. But it's hard to get them all everyone involved. And so those games have been built for total inclusion. But as you go up, that becomes harder, in my opinion. Bear in mind, I'm someone who's organising drills for my football team with cones, and we can get everyone involved. It strikes me as much harder with cricket to do that. So you're fighting against that part as well. Cost, practicality, summer sport, lack of schools involvement. And that's why taking the sport off national television, free to air national television, was such a huge blow. And we've reaped the cost of that, haven't we? We've reaped the cost of that.
Well, taking it sort of forward, and it's quite nice that you're sort of leading me into my next sort of line of thought, is that at club level, having assumed that you've got people from primary school age and they come through and they play under 13s, they play under 15s, and then it gets to that 16, 17, 18-year-old group where there's another big tail off. But I'll try and take the positive angle that you've got kids then that want to play cricket. They're actually quite good. And they want to play to the next level. So from club level, it's to county. But counties seem to... there's a varying track record in counties bringing through kids through at that age. They put them into academies and they bring them on and they start playing second 11 and hopefully first 11 and above and beyond that. But you see, at that point, when you become involved with counties, you then walk into this world of commercialism and the even more expensive cost of playing, even age group cricket at a county. There's a lot of travel involved and a lot of time off work for parents that are trying to support their children.
Yeah, I think the other thing at play here is that the assumption with football, and obviously I've worked in football, so I know how some of it works. I didn't work on the coaching side; I worked on the commercial side and the content side. However, with football, the rewards are so high, you're going to keep on trying. You're going to keep on trying, and the rewards for spotting talent are so high for clubs that they are going to continue to look and have safety nets, even though there's inbuilt biases within those. So you assume any good player that has the skills and the determination and the fitness and the coachability as football will get into the system at some point. And they might get tossed out, but they'll get into the system at some point. I think the players are going to want to do it because the rewards are so high. The clubs are going to want to do that because the rewards are so high. There's not entirely true what I said, but I'm massively generalizing. With cricket, I think it's different. Okay, because bear in mind, once you get to that 14, 15 age, and I have not knowledge of that within grassroots football. Suddenly, you're moving away from recreational to representative. And you've not got to give X amount of minutes to X amount of people, for example. You can say, we are picking the best team and that's it. You can't play just because you're enthusiastic. Well, you can, but there's a big shakeout at that particular age. Now, it would strike me that what's a rookie county pro paid at the moment? Didn't they reduce it over the last? Is it 2022, something like that?
Yeah, probably something like that. Yeah,
it's something like that. Okay, well, if you come out of public school and which an awful lot have, and you're very well educated, you can earn a damn sight more than that doing something else.
Yeah,
you can go into the city and earn that times whatever.
Yeah,
you tell me. 4, 5, 10. I don't know. I haven't got a
multiples, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Multiples, and this is also what we saw in the West Indies. Of course, we saw that's been a factor with the West Indies. The West Indies have a huge culture of cricket, but the money in the game has meant that their premium athletes have been looking more towards basketball and the NBA, for example, rather than stay in cricket. And those rewards, that keeps you determined as a player that might duck out of the system, and it also keeps the teams trying to get those players into the system. So even though
West Indies is a good example of, and it leads us to the next stage of this conversation of how much has changed in a generation. So a generation ago, England would go on tour to the West Indies. It would be a 3-month tour encompassing 5 test matches at Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, Antigua, Guyana, wherever, with a few domestic games thrown in along the way. The next tour that's been announced to the West Indies is basically to the complete comfort and benefit for the Barmy Army. And we saw last time that England went to Barbados that the Kensington Oval was full of England fans with a small corner of local Bajans that were sort of rooting for their team. And I would suggest that if you are going touring anywhere, it wants to be a test of your mettle in those conditions, in the way that when people come to the UK, to England and play in front of the Holly stand or in front of a packed Old Trafford or what it's like at Lord's and that kind of thing. It's that home environment. But this has come about because of the cost of cricket. And it's now no longer for the West Indies. It's too much. They simply can't afford to put on those kind of tours. I don't know what's happened between then and now. Clearly, a money issue, where they have to basically tailor the whole thing to have a load of England fans that are going to go over and spend loads of money and pay exorbitant ticket prices. It's where the commercialism is really having a damaging effect on the game.
Well, I saw this last year with when we were in lockdown. The 2 teams that came over were pretty much, and this is very much my opinion, it was Pakistan and the West Indies, which were the two biggest names that would come over for the money because they needed the money to come over. India and Australia have got more finances. That they've got enough money to say no.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the way I saw it. So weren't bringing over Afghanistan, Bangladesh, because you needed to have some sort of attractive name, and Pakistan and the West Indies probably in the middle of the rankings these days, obviously in terms of Test cricket, but you could get them over, and there was stories about they were promised X, Y, and Z, and they ended up in a Travelodge in Derby kind of thing in terms of the way that they were looked after. And of course, the ECB, very regretfully, I think, let down cricket and let down Pakistan in not going back to repay them for what they did, because their team came out under stress, rather, not duress, but extreme stress, away from their families, all the protocols, all the lockdowns.
Yeah, and it was in the height of lockdown as well.
Yeah, and we've seen, players come out of the Big Bash because they've just had enough, and of course they're foregoing money to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we owe West Indies and Pakistan, and we didn't do the right thing back. But look, we know that we all watched Death of a Gentleman, the documentary, which was kind of outside the room when there was, to quote what they said, a bit of a stitch up with the three big countries, England, Australia, and the West Indies.
India,
Australia, and England. Sorry.
Yeah.
Kind of jigged everything in their favour to maintain their position as preeminent cricket nation. So there is now a have and have-nots, and that's got repercussions. I love to see a strong West Indies. I love, and partly because I grew up watching the great West Indies side in the 70s and 80s, and that's the interesting thing. Just going back to the race issue there, if I may, for a second, there was I did sociology of sport when I was university. My first degree. I did a dissertation on racism in football, and I went on to do a master's degree in the sociology of sport, where I studied things such as racism. And in the 70s and 80s, there was a concept of what was called stacking. So you'd put in NFL football, American football, the black players were the wide receivers, but they weren't. There was very rare for it to be a quarterback. In England, black players were wingers, but they weren't centre backs and weren't goalkeepers. I think there's only one goalkeeper I can think of who was black in English football at that time, which was Alex Williams.
Yeah.
Man City, I think he might have gone to Stoke.
Oh, Man City, yeah.
Michael Alex Williams. And I think there was a quarterback called Warren Moon, who was a little bit later than that for Houston, I think it was. But the point was, it was based on racism, where they were kind of stacked up in positions where speed and flair, but not reliability.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. And the West Indies. What I loved about that West Indies side, I just want to make this point. That West Indies side in the 70s and 80s, they absolutely destroyed that, because they were stronger than us. They were stronger mentally. They were stronger physically. They were stronger in terms of their technique. Viv Richards just destroyed us at times. Absolutely destroyed us. And it put that concept of stacking, which is obvious, because we can all think in the 70s of black players who were wingers in football, right? You could probably apply it to cricket in terms of fast bowlers compared to opening batsmen, for example. I'm not sure about that, but I'm just thinking on the fly. But that West Indies side was so strong. And I remember the banner, the black wash banner, when they did us 5-0. And there's another documentary that I've seen about that West Indies side. I'm trying to remember.
Byron Babylon.
Yes, that's it. Absolutely fantastic, right? Because it showed their strength and what they were fighting against. And I saw a quote this week from Viv Richards suggesting that, as a graphic with a quote from Viv Richards saying his record at Yorkshire was extremely good. because he was more determined, because of the stick that he got, just to bring it round. But I thought, that West Indies side just were, and it was a big lift, given that, in society at the time, we had race riots, we had economic and financial problems within the country, and the first thing that happens there, politically, and I also did politics at university, is you get some far right and racial politics. And at football games in the 70s, the National Front, were very vocal, very vocal, in selling their publications outside, and that was linked to, and this is the stuff I did in sociology sport, that was linked to the economic circumstances at the time and the type of electorate they thought they could appeal to, and they went for football. And the West Indies side were crushing that idea, and I adored them for that. Adored them.
You're right. I mean, that film's if anyone hasn't seen that, Fire in Babylon, because I think you're right, and it does discuss the psychology behind their turnaround in fortunes because it was very quick, it was very rapid. They went to Australia in 75, got pummeled, and then they basically steeled themselves and fought back, and in quite some fashion. Moving on a little bit, obviously with still the same sort of strains of conversation, but just picking up on what you said about the visitors that came to England in lockdown, Pakistan and West Indies, and how the ECB abysmally failed to reciprocate the favour. The ECB, to me, over the last 12 months, have behaved on many fronts, many issues, absolutely disgracefully. And the ineptitude at handling quite big situations has left me speechless. Can you put your finger on it?
Barney Ronay wrote a piece in The Guardian that resonated with me, that he called the ECB, the taking over from the TCCB, a 25-year-old gamble based on TV rights in the England team. And if I look at the last generation where cricket was in 2005 or the 90s, and certainly in 2005, when it took over a summer properly. And if you look since then, the participation is down, the visibility of the game is down. And I think over the last 12 months with the ECB, certainly the current version, what they've done is divided the game. Obviously, everyone knows, well, not everyone knows, but I am about as anti-100 as you can get. And one of the reasons there's two reasons why I'm anti-100 more than anything. It's anti-counties, and it's trying to reduce the amount of counties by stealth, not by design. But secondly, the way it was introduced, I thought was appalling. NDAs were flying around, things were agreed and signed off and done before they were discussed with counties. And I must say, counties have been at times extremely intransigent. So they've made their own bed to a certain extent. But if you add on top of that, so that's caused huge division. And that sort of resentment will not go away, in my opinion. And I think that was a factor in the departure of Ian Watmore as chairman. And I know that there are newspaper reports now suggesting there's a meeting on Friday in which Tom Harrison will be under pressure. And I think he has a case to answer. I thought I think there was a tweet out there from the cricketer saying that they'd been in front of a select committee 3 times in the last 18 months. I can only remember twice, which is the 100 and the 1 week. But both times I thought their performance was poor. In the 100, it wasn't so emotive, the issue. But Colin Gray's performance I thought was poor, especially when he said fans had been consulted with regard to the 100. And Tom Harrison, was stamped down to a certain extent by the MPs, wanted to get a prepared statement out there. He was stamped down on that. I tweeted an area where he refused to answer questions. And Barney Ronay's piece was interesting because he's turned, he argued this, and it was a good turn of phrase. He said, for years under the TCCB, we have the Blazers, the amateur public schoolboys.
Yeah, I know the quote you're going to come out with. Go on.
And now we've had 25 years of the suits, right? Well, I am an anorak, okay? And I would rather have an anorak, right? The reason being, I care about the game, and I don't want the game to be superseded by the pursuit of money.
Yeah.
Given that, look where it's got football. It's undoubtedly a better product, but the game has made very rich players, very rich agents, and some very rich executives. Many people with a longer term view on the game don't suggest it's actually made the game any better. The product is better, the stadiums are better, there's more ta-da.
Yeah.
But has it actually made you I see the activities and the behavior of a load of 14-year-old boys and their parents and their team managers on a Sunday, and I'm not happy with it.
Yeah,
I want cricket to be better than that. And given that, so much of the game is based on volunteers, let's grow resilience in the game rather than short-term money. Grow resilience, long-term resilience, because what the 100 has done in particular, it's taken away the resilience from the game, because sooner or later you turn around and say, well, why do we need these extra 8 counties? Let's just play 100 games and do away with it.
And it's totally destroyed the kind of the grassroots structure of it as well.
Yeah. But it's the pursuit of finances that if we are getting more money, that is the most important thing. Now, they would turn around and say, that's not true. That's not true. And Tom Harrison came out and, obviously he came with 4 people and the buck was being passed along back and forth. But they were listing out all these schemes that they've done for promoting diversity, etc. It's like, mate, I think you've been listening an hour ago. There was a guy in years talking. Okay, so your schemes aren't working, or Rafiq was talking in tears, and then supposedly some of these hotlines and appeals for more issues to come out have got a tremendous amount of response. So we're scratching below the surface. We're finding finding more skeletons in the cupboard. I'm mixing that up horribly there, but you know what I mean.
No, definitely.
And I think the ECB have made mistake after mistake after mistake, and also 2000. Mistake after mistake. 2005. It's like, when do the mistakes come back? Because 2005, for me, I know there was an upside to it. But overall, it's a mistake. Who paid for that? Who's going to pay for the mistakes now? Because it seems that nobody pays. We just get another suit in.
You think there's talk about this cricket having its own version of Kick It Out and T-shirts and slogans and whatever else. Certainly over the last, and I'm talking about cricket, over the last few years, to me, it's just smacks of tokenism that there's, we are doing something, we're in a T-shirt. We are doing something, we are putting up banners everywhere, we're whatever. But that's all they're doing. I've not really seen or felt it feeding down or having the effect that it probably should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, that was thrown at Harrison. I saw a quote this week from, I think it was from a county chairman, not a named one, suggesting that they did not pay enough attention to anything but the 100 in the summer because they were trying to get that going. And therefore, the Rafiq issue was left, or the Yorkshire racism issue was left on the sidelines, as indeed was the county championship. So, you're looking after their baby, you're looking after the finances of the game, you're not looking after the soul of the game. And it's the soul of the game that keeps people like you running your cricket club, and people like me running a football club. It's the soul of the game. It's the belief in the good of the game and the positivity that it can give to all genders, all races, and all ages. It should be teaching teamwork. It should be teaching unselfishness. Unfortunately, from our leadership, not just in cricket, but across all sports, it's teaching the wrong values. And I want values back in sport, because it's meaning and identity that is the difference maker. That's what makes me an Essex fan. That's what makes me an England fan. And that's what made me pay for my membership for Essex when I knew I wasn't going to see any cricket. I was going to get no value.
Yeah.
But I want Essex to exist, so I'm going to give them a couple of £100 to be a member.
Yeah.
You know, and I tell you what, cricket relied on that, because members gave so much during that period of time. Why? Because it means something.
Yeah.
And they feel the dirty has been done on them as well, especially as, you know, as an Essex fan, you know, Keith Boyce, Norbert Phillip, these are great players that Essex's legacy is built upon, and we let them down. The game has let them down, along with many others at many other clubs. I'm just talking about Essex.
Yeah.
But they were huge figures in our history, And I thought about Keith Boyce has passed away, I know. Norbert Phillip is still around, I believe. I'm not sure about.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I thought about them this week, and I thought, yeah, because I remember covering an Arsenal game where there was some racism at Valencia, and Thierry Henry was standing alongside John Carew, and Thierry Henry was getting some stick from the Valencia crowd. And he was literally pointing at John Carew and pointing at him, you know. And even the lack of logic behind racism is even a racist person must understand. You know, if I'm cheering on a black guy that plays for my football club, or a Pakistani player who plays for my cricket club, it's illogical to abuse those same types of people on the opposite side. No logic at all.
That's it. We better wrap it up, because I've just noticed my account is about to expire in time. Richard, always great to catch up, and we will have you in the studio soon, hopefully, everything permitting, and we shall discuss things much, much further. But anyway, thanks for your time today. Been great chatting, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers, Darren.